Chapter 4 of the Christmas Mystery. December 4th. When Joachim woke up on Friday, he made sure it was completely quiet in the house. Then he opened the fourth door. It was a picture of a man in a light blue robe, which looked a little like a nightgown. In his hand he held a tall staff. But Joachim had no time to look at the picture carefully because a scrap of paper fell on the bed today, too. Joshua. Elizabeth Hanson and the angel Ephriel hurried after the sheep and the lamb. They passed a red log cabin in a small clearing in the woods, and from a hilltop Ephriel pointed down at a large lake. That's Vänern, the biggest lake in Scandinavia, and the watch shows that it's 1891, and that many years have passed since Jesus was born, but we've only just arrived in Sweden. A rapidly moving river flowed out of the lake. A bridge arched over the river, and they walked across it. That is the Göta River. We'll follow an old cart track along the riverbank. Little lamb, coaxed Elizabeth, but the sheep and the lamb were already running again. They passed a village. On the outskirts was a church that was painted red, and the people from the village were heading along the road towards it. Most of them were on foot, but some of them sat in big horse-drawn carts. The men were dressed in black suits and black hats, and many of the women were in black as well. Some of them carried hymn books. "It must be Sunday," said Elizabeth. They paused for a moment or two and looked down at all the people. Suddenly a little boy noticed them. But he barely had time to look astonished because at that same moment the angel Ephriel began running again. Elizabeth had to hurry to catch up. Once she turned and looked back, but all the people in front of the church had vanished. The horses and carts had vanished too. When they left the village behind, Elizabeth turned to the angel and said, "The only one who saw us was a little boy." "Excellent. We try not to attract too much attention. Sometimes we can't help it if someone catches a glimpse of us, but a glimpse is quite enough." They ran on through the woods and the fields, and now again they saw people making hay or reaping wheat with scythes. Sometimes they had to take a roundabout way so as not to scare anyone. Before long, the sheep and the lamb found a field that was so green and tempting that it dazzled the eyes. "Now's your chance," whispered Elizabeth, if we go up to them carefully. But just then, a man came walking towards them. He was wearing a blue tunic and holding a tall staff that was curved at the top. He greeted them. "Peace be with you who walk on the narrow way along the Göta River. My name is Joshua the shepherd. Then you are one of us." Elizabeth didn't understand what the angel meant. "I am coming with you to the Holy Land, for I must be in the fields when the angels announce the glad tidings of the birth of Jesus." A clever idea occurred to Elizabeth. "If you are a proper shepherd, perhaps you can bring the lamb to me." The shepherd bowed low. That's not difficult for a good shepherd. He took a few steps firmly towards the sheep and the lamb. The next moment the lamb was lying at Elizabeth's feet. She knelt and petted its soft fleece. "I think you are the fastest stuffed animal in the world, but I caught you at last." The shepherd thumped his crook on the ground and said, "To Bethlehem, to Bethlehem." The lamb and the sheep bounded ahead, the shepherd, the angel, and Elizabeth after them. They came to another small town, and from a hill outside the town they looked down on a cluster of red timber houses. Ephriel explained that the town was called Kungälv. That means King's Rock. The town was given the name because of the Scandinavian kings used to meet here to take counsel together. One of them was Sigurd Jorsalfar. Jorsalfar means the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Sigurd was given the name because he had gone on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land where Jesus was born. Soon they passed above a city at the mouth of the Göta River. Women in long dresses and men wearing hats and carrying walking sticks were parading up and down the streets. Others rode in fine coaches drawn by two horses. That's Göteborg. The time is 1,814 years before Jesus, and Denmark has had to hand Norway over to Sweden. Now Norway will have her own constitution. Joshua the shepherd turned and waved to them. "To Bethlehem," he called, "to Bethlehem." And they sped on through Sweden. Joachim had just hidden the paper from the advent calendar in his secret box when Mama came in. And what was the picture today? She said. Joachim knew he did not need to answer. Mom always looked at the calendar herself. She clasped her hands. It's one of the shepherds in the fields. Why did you say in the fields? Mama told him that there were pictures of shepherds in nice old Advent calendars because an angel had come to the shepherds in the fields to tell them that the baby Jesus was born. They come as far as Göteborg. Göteborg? And who are they? Asked Mom. Elizabeth Hansen, the angel ethereal, and Joshua the shepherd. They're going to Bethlehem. To Bethlehem. Mama looked at him in astonishment. Don't let this old calendar get to you. They're only pictures. Joachim realized that he couldn't keep telling Mama and Papa all he knew about Elizabeth. If he did, he wouldn't be able to keep the secrets of the scraps of paper in the from the calendar either. He realized something else. He would have to try to talk to John. John was the only person who knew where the magic Advent calendar had come from. Perhaps he also knew more about Elizabeth Hansen. But how could Joachim find John? He wasn't allowed to go to town or to go to the market square by himself. But that afternoon he had just come home from school when someone rang the doorbell. It couldn't be Mama because she knew Joachim never locked the door from the inside. So who was it? He went out the hall and opened the door, and on the steps stood the bookseller who had given him the Advent calendar. Ah, there you are, just as I thought. Why? Asked Joachim, suddenly a little scared that the bookseller might want the Advent calendar back. Besides, how did he know where they lived? The man put his hand in his coat pocket and took out a driver's license. Your father left it on the counter. I thought it must be yours, but since you didn't come back to the store, I decided to drop it off myself. I live close by, you see, at 12 Clover Road. That wasn't far. One of Joachim's classmates lived at number 7. And how's it going with the calendar? Super. There's some mysterious pieces of paper in it, too. Are there? The bookseller gave him a big smile. He handed Joachim Papa's driver's license. Well, I must be going. It's a busy time for us booksellers. It wasn't long before Mama and Papa were home from work. Shortly afterwards, they had dinner. Joachim had decided not to say anything about the driver's license until Papa mentioned it himself. Instead, he started to talk about something completely different. What's a pilgrimage? His parents must have thought it strange that Joachim asked about that, because pilgrimage was a difficult word. Papa helped himself to more fish pie and said a pilgrim is someone who travels to a holy place. Like Josaphat, he traveled all the way to Jerusalem, didn't he? That's why they call him the traveler to Jerusalem. Mama and Papa looked at each other. Have you been learning about Sigurd Josaphat at school? Joachim shook his head. He realized it was time to talk about the driver's license. He looked at Papa. Have you found your driver's license yet? Not a trace. Well, I have, said Joachim. He got up from his chair and went into his room to get the driver's license. He handed it to Papa mischievously. Papa nearly choked on his dinner. Where did you find it, Joachim? Surely you didn't. Papa had to interrupt Papa before he said something he would come to regret. You left it in the bookshop where we bought the Advent calendar. Papa looked as if he'd had a visitation from an angel in broad daylight. He had, in a way, too, except that the angel had sent a white-haired bookseller instead of coming himself. He came this afternoon. He said he lives nearby. Then Mama and Papa understood. Well, he's quite a bookseller, for that is quite unusual. And you're quite an unusual muddlehead, said Joachim. Good night.